Good morning. The November 24th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council is now in session. Warden Liz Danielson presiding.
Good morning, everyone. No opening remarks this morning. We'll move right into roll call, please, Mr. Rudder.
Warden Danielson.
I'm here.
Councillor Moffat.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Ryle.
Present.
Councillor DeVolin.
Here.
And Councillor Shell.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, I would like to add an item under closed session to discuss a matter of which a council, board, committee, or other body may hold a closed meeting under another act. So if council would agree to that, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the amended agenda? Councillor DeVolin and Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
By Councillor DeVolin, seconded by Councillor Kennedy, be it resolved that the November 24th, 2021 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried, thank you. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof this morning? Hearing none. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of October 27th? Councillors Roberts and Shell.
By Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Shell, be it resolved that the minutes from the October 27th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. No business arising from previous meeting and no delegations. So could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the reports and recommendations from the Committee of the Whole meeting from November the 10th? It was Councillor Moffat and Councillor Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Ryle, be it resolved that the recommendations from the November 10th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Committee of the Whole be adopted by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Nothing from joint accessibility. So next up is planning and environment, and we'll bring in our planner. Good morning, Mr. Stone.
Good morning, members of council, Madam Mayor, Warden. From an update perspective, you'll see later on in the agenda, we'll be speaking about the Land Division Committee that met and heard 6 applications. We were able to award the final contract for the Bathymetry Survey work. That will mean that we'll have 9 reaches within the main watershed of the county being surveyed this year before it freezes up. I did note on my way in today that some of the ponds are starting to show some ice, so hopefully they'll get it done in time. And there's a fulsome update in terms of the climate change programming that's happening from the climate change coordinator. She did note the reference to the main, the global conference on climate change that happened in Scotland, and pointed out some of the activities that are happening on the electric vehicle charging front. And that would be about it. I do know that the Director of Public Works and myself will be presenting a report to council later on with regards to the Wallings Road project that was of interest to council. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions on the update? Councillor Roberts?
Just, it's sort of not in this update, but to do with the Climate Change Advisory Committee. When Corey presented, she talked about having, I don't have it right in front of me, but the terms of reference were to have, I thought it was 1 councillor from each municipality. So Dysart wasn't sure whether we're supposed to appoint one. Well, as it turns out, they're supposed to apply directly through to the planning department, whoever wants to be on the committee. Not, is that correct, Steve? Do you know?
I think what Corey was expecting is for the local councils to just send that information on the person they'd like to have on the committee to her. I will follow up with her and see if a formal application is needed from the councils, and I'll do that for you before lunch.
Okay, thank you. I'm pretty sure she wants it to go directly to her. So we didn't put anything on our agenda. We have one counselor who's interested, and I said just apparently just apply. So I just wanted to clear that in case the other councils are having the same concerns.
Yeah, I understood that it was a recommendation from or an appointment by the individual councils, and that it didn't necessarily have to be a counselor. It could be a committee member, or a volunteer that's on a committee. But let's look for clarification on that. Mr. Redder.
I think what we're hoping is that anyone who's interested, fill in that application. Each municipality will have a representative, and so they will be reviewed by council in December. And if each individual local municipality wants to go back and have that approved by the local council, that will be up to them. How each local council chooses to deal with that will be, as I say, up to them. So, but we are hoping that anyone who's interested in sitting on the committee, regardless of in what role, or in what capacity, would fill in that application form for county council to review in December.
Any other questions or concerns about that? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the planning department update? Councillor Burton and Councillor Kennedy.
By Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Kennedy, be it resolved that the November 24th, 2021 report on planning department projects be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is a review of the review of the request for or the proposals for short-term rentals. So if you'd like to speak to that, Steve, please.
Yes, thank you, Council, Madam Warden. We had two submissions for the RFP. One particular one was fulsome in their approach, and the other one was, the best way to describe it was more of a software approach to monitoring short-term rentals. And the team here reviewed it a week ago and came out with its opinion that we should go with the J.R. Richards approach. Council is familiar with their consulting work because of the shoreline bylaw evaluation that they've done. And we basically decided as a staff team to go with their three-stage review, which allows council to look at actually forms of implementation at the end of the process. The award would cost $55,235, and that would be coming out of the budget for the bylaw enforcement. For the work would be conducted in the first quarter of next year. They expect it to be completed by the end of March. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Redder.
If I could just make one note, I think what we are proposing with respect to the budget is that 50% of that be funded by the county and the remaining 50% be shared equally by the local municipalities.
Councillor Moffat, you had a question or concern?
Both. In the report under Objective 3, analysis of context, the listing of municipalities, this is the same thing that was requested with the shoreline bylaw. And we know that the response to that was that inquiries were made to other municipalities to provide context about their own shoreline work. And we were told that nobody called them back. So I would just hope that, knowing that going into this process, that we would require a little bit more. Seems strange to put in an RFP and have the proponent come back and say, yeah, we're going to check with everybody. I just don't want to hear at the other end that they checked and no one called them back. I know we're not in charge of other people calling them back, but I think the local comparators is vital around these kinds of things. And I think it was a big piece missing in Shoreline, and I don't want to see the same piece missing here.
Okay, duly noted. Other questions or comments about this item? Could I have a mover and a seconder? Mr. Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Royale. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the November 24th, 2021 staff report detailing the evaluation process for the short-term rental review and consultation request for proposal, and that the project be awarded to J.L. Richards and Associates at their quoted fee of $55,235.55 plus applicable taxes.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the correspondence listing. Were there any comments or items that you wish to support on the listing? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the correspondence listing? Councillor Roberts and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the correspondence listing for the period of October 20th, 2021 to November 17th, 2021 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is a request to release an RFP for a tandem axle snowplow. As Robert is away at a conference today, Sil will be speaking to this item. Good morning, Sil.
Good morning, Madam Warden and members of council. Our report this morning is in regards to requesting early release of a request for proposal for the purchase of a tandem truck. Given the lead time and a long wait period of delivery, we feel it's appropriate to ask in advance of the new year for this purchase.
Are there any questions about this request? Councillor DeVolen?
Yeah, our latest either delivery and or pre-orders for units, the number we're getting is about 18 months. Is that the similar information you're getting, Sil?
Well, it's between 8. They're saying 8 to 12 months.
Oh, okay.
They're saying that, but in reality, what they're getting is completely different. We are still waiting for a delivery from early March of this year. We're hoping to get it before Christmas, but I'm not holding my breath. And if we do get it before Christmas, that's a bonus. But yeah, there's quite a delay on delivery.
Any other questions of Sil? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve this going forward? Councillors Shell and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council provide approval for staff to release a request for proposal for the acquisition of a 2022 tandem axle snowplow.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sil. I should have asked this in advance. Should I be dealing with this next item or should the deputy warden?
Typically, I just present the report and it's just, yeah, that's all. And you just move in, you just pass a resolution to receive the report.
Okay.
So we did at our October council meeting, I had distributed the nomination forms for the position of warden for 2022. We did have one complete nomination submitted, and at the deadline of, or before the deadline of 4:30 p.m. on November 15th. The one nominee was Councillor Danielson, or our current Warden Danielson. So with that, there will be an acclamation and a swearing in of the Warden-elect on Tuesday, December 14th at 2 p.m. at our inaugural meeting. And at that time, the mover and the seconder will be given an opportunity to speak to the nomination. And of course, all the other festivities that go along with that will occur.
Festivities via Zoom.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about that recommendation? Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shell and Kennedy, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the nomination results for the position of Haliburton County Warden for 2022 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried, thank you. Next is our discussion on the vaccination policy. And Mr. Rutter, if you would like to present your report.
Sure. The draft policy that you see in front of you would apply to, I've included some background on why we are here and how we got here. I won't go through that in detail unless there are questions. The draft policy would apply to members of council, committee and board members, staff, volunteers, and contractors. It would require everyone who holds those positions to provide proof of being fully vaccinated. There are a couple provisions in provincial regulations that would allow an exemption. There is a very small opportunity or very limited opportunity with a medical exemption and a human rights one as well. So those have been reflected in the draft policy. We would, if council passes this policy today or adopts this policy today, we will be all staff will be given 30 days to provide proof of vaccination, a full vaccination, which is the 14 days after the 2 doses or the second dose. If they don't provide that proof, they will be required for a 45-day period to get testing at least once a week. And that test would be arranged on their own time and at their own expense. Our paramedics have been in a similar protocol since September. So, and they have to provide a negative test at the beginning of every shift. And so because of that, because the process is in place already, all of the protocols are in place, we're suggesting that we would carry on with that for our paramedics. After 45 days, so 75 days in total, that if employees who don't have or haven't provided that proof of vaccination would be placed on an unpaid leave of absence for an initial period of 30 days. If their circumstances change and they become fully vaccinated at that point, they could be reinstated at some point after, but they would remain on leave or be placed on a more a longer leave if they remain if they haven't provided that proof of vaccination. So unless there are other questions, I think that's the majority. The one provision we have added is to make sure that this policy is reviewed on a regular basis, at least 1 year from the date of implementation. But certainly there is the potential that circumstances change and it will need to be reviewed prior to that deadline.
I've got a couple of questions, and one of the things that concerns me is that now that people are being asked to get booster shots, what is going to constitute a full dose? Right now it's the 2 shots, but I have a feeling that it's going to reach a point where we're all going to be asked to have a booster, and that may continue to be an annual thing. So, I'm just kind of concerned about what we consider to be a full dose. and how we deal with that.
Yeah, I think that would be one of the things that would trigger a review of the policy if in fact it's required for everyone, but at this point it's not. So at this point, the definition of fully vaccinated is 14 days after the second dose. So we're just really dealing with the information that we have at hand, and if that changes, then we would adjust accordingly and bring that back to council for direction.
And I'm also not sure how we manage the issue of counselors. Because I can't see that it would be legal to make a counselor stay at home on an unpaid leave, given that they're not a hired position or contracted, but rather elected. And I did the working group talk about that or look into that at all?
I think the extent of the conversation was to really recognize that was a real challenge. But really, other than that, the only way around that would be to exempt members of council from the policy or the provisions of the policy.
I'm sure that others will have thoughts about that. Just to clarify about the paramedics, you're saying that they're required to be tested every day before they go to work. Is that for both vaccinated and unvaccinated paramedics, or just unvaccinated?
Just unvaccinated paramedics.
Okay. I wonder if we need to strengthen the wording around review. There was I think some pretty good wording in the Dysart policy about the extent of, it's not just saying to make sure that it's reviewed within a year, but to tighten it up to tie it into any changing legislation. Anyway, I look to members of council for comments. Councillor Roberts.
So just thank you, Warden. Just to pick up on that note at the end of our policy, it does say policy term. So I had that in front of me, so I might as well share that with the group. This policy shall be in effect while the vaccination passport program is in effect provincially. This policy shall be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure consistency with provincial direction and public safety. This policy shall be reassessed based on emerging evidence or in light of new information. So it doesn't say a time frame.
Other members of council think that sounds reasonable to include? Councillor Kennedy. You probably.
Yeah, obviously I do. I thought you were looking for questions. Okay. Sorry. I do. That's a good. Yeah.
You have a question?
I have a number of questions. So I'll try and keep it short if I may. And I would like to have Mike maybe clear up some confusion I have over the EMS policy. That was taken from Directive 6. And there was actually an option in that they didn't have to provide section 1C. It included the things to have rapid testing, that type of thing in the education package, but there's also the ability for the service to, or the county to opt out of that and go with the current draft policy as presented. So was council ever asked for comment on that, or was that done by the EOC, or who developed the policy wherein medics were able to do rapid testing and rather than be subject to the content of this draft protocol policy?
The initial response to the provincial directive was implemented by staff, by the management team, and I guess the conversation about whether to include them in this policy is here today. So that our recommendation is in front of you.
Did you have further questions, Councillor Kennedy?
Yeah, I did. And it goes to your comments about the councillors. With this draft policy, it would appear that given nominations open in the spring, that if you're not vaccinated, you're not going to be able to run for office in case you win. That's my take on it. It says that you have to be fully vaccinated in order to attend meetings. You've precluded a small, maybe insignificant portion of the population, but it is infringing on the democratic rights for somebody to run for council. That's my comment on that. And my other one, just if I may continue then, is As far as the employees having to pay for their own rapid testing, I note that the Ontario Human Rights Commission has noted that under Section 5, the organization should cover the cost of COVID testing as part of their duty to accommodate. So I'll just include that. That's a recommendation. It's not a mandate or anything, but it is a recommendation from the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I had some notes here and now I have to sort of get my thoughts reorganized here. The fact that the EMS policy, I thank you, Councillor Kennedy, for your insight on that. One of my sticking points has been who pays for the tests. If the decision has already been made that some county employees' tests are being paid for and they're rapid tests, then we can't go in a different direction. I don't think that that's an equitable application of the process. I have no problem saying, you know, I'm fully vaccinated and believe everybody should be vaccinated. But I really struggle with supporting potential job losses. And in terms of the leaves of absence, that's been a sticking point from the beginning for me, even with some ongoing conversation at Algonquin Highlands. And I'm open, obviously, to what others have to say, but I really struggle with that aspect of it. If testing can continue, I would just like to hear more from folks. And I have to support as well. Liz and I had spoken briefly about this yesterday in one of our conversations. I don't believe that we, as a municipality, I don't think we have the authority to place a councillor on leave of absence, because that's contrary to the resignation section of the Act 259.1. So they were elected by the public. So I think if somebody, in terms of council, they're two separate things. If a councillor can be tested and attend meetings, then that should be okay in terms of, like, I'm not in favor of a lot of accommodations, let me be very clear on that. But in this one, particularly within the context and scope of our role, I don't think we have the jurisdictional authority to tell councillors to stay home, because under the Act, under the resignation section of the Act, it would fall into being absent for 3 months from a meeting. But it would be if there's no accommodation or an alternative for attending meetings in terms of testing before attending a meeting, then you're in fact setting them up to fail under that section of the Act. And I don't think that would be, I think that would be easily contested.
Other thoughts and comments? Councillor Rael?
Is it possible for councillors to fall under the same category as paramedics, so that if in the event that a councillor chooses not to declare whether they are or not vaccinated, could they then be subject to testing prior to each meeting, so that or any public gathering, so that at the end of the day, it's similar to paramedics, they can't attend a site? I have no problem with it. I'm fully vaccinated and I will be getting my booster shot in January, so that's not an issue for me. And the other thing I had was in the actual policy, on the 4th page, item 6, it says, just for clarity, it says continued non-compliance may result in the leave of absence. I'm wondering if we could add the word unpaid leave, just to make it crystal clear as to where we stand.
Just to the first of your comments, Councillor Rael, I don't think we're talking about whether or not they choose to declare whether they've had a shot or not. It's if they don't wish to have a shot, what are the consequences? What are we going to require of them? Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, it's an awkward conversation, because at first blush, it feels like a slam dunk. Get vaccinated or stay home, right? That's the general perspective across the board. I am not in support of the DNA altering tinfoil hat people. I am not in support of this is some sort of fascist regime people. I do believe that everyone should be vaccinated. However, my thought process is purely process oriented. And I struggle with the losing your job thing, or the what seems to be an overreach onto members of council jurisdictionally. If I was unvaccinated and as a member of council and this went through, I would be looking for the alternative that you were going to provide me so that I could continue to undertake the duties as someone elected by the public, not by the corporation of the County of Haliburton. So I find it actually quite a fascinating jurisdictional tug of war, because people should be vaccinated, people aren't. But particularly around the council part, I just don't think we have the jurisdiction to do something outside the directive that provides people their seat, which is the Municipal Act.
So the answer to that would be to require that they be allowed to attend, but they'd have to be tested first.
I mean, I guess that would be the option. That's what I'm looking for, somebody on the screen to say something. Unless I'm the lone voice on that. Like Mike as CAO and clerk, maybe you have some more insight into, is it possible to challenge to chat if a member of council, remember, we don't make decisions for the faces on the screen. We make decisions for purpose, not for people. And so it has to be a completely dispassionate discussion and decision. But I just struggle with our jurisdiction around that.
I guess I would share your question, but I'm not aware of any case law or any challenge to policies in other municipalities.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. As fellow county councillors, because I spoke out about this before, that Dysart did pass their vaccination policy now a month ago, more than a month ago. Ours is, so we had the 30-day grace period to provide your attestation. Everybody has done that. So we haven't collected any actual, you had to fill out a sheet that said whether you're double vaccinated, medical exemption, or that you aren't. So that is in the hands of our HR and CAO are the only two privy to that. It's working, and our vaccination policy is different from what the county is proposing, in that we do have that option to, if someone is not vaccinated, fully vaccinated, that they will be tested. And it is at Dysart's, it's not even at our expense. There are free free tests available through the province. We have many of them. And so I, as the mayor, am not privy to how many people are not double vaccinated, but I'll just say that our policy was passed and it appears to be working, and we're getting on with the business of our municipality. So I will stand by Dysart's policy.
A question about that. The tests that are being made available, are they rapid tests or?
Yes, if I can answer, yes, they are the rapid tests. And in our policy, it states that if they fail a rapid test, they need to go get the PCR test. So they have to stay home until they get a clear. So if in the event, because we do know that sometimes those rapid tests show up false positive sometimes. So yes, if they fail that for whatever reason, you have to stay home. And our policy does apply to councillors, all staff, volunteers, contractors who are in direct contact with within the municipality and within employees. So it's not for instance, even a contractor who comes in and cleans at night will not be in any contact with the municipal staff. But if an electrician was coming in the building during office hours, they would have to abide by this policy as well.
I've got to say, the one aspect of the Dysart policy that I completely disagree with is the attestation. I think there needs to be a proof of vaccination. I think if somebody is really and truly an anti-vaxxer, but they also are really and truly afraid of losing their job, that they're, there's just too much room for somebody to not be quite truthful. And we've got no way of knowing that. To me, if you're vaccinated, you should be able to prove it. Anyway, that's just my thoughts, but I'm looking for thoughts from members of other councils other than Dysart. This is for everybody. Councillor Shell.
Thank you. Yeah, I almost feel like we maybe need to understand or possibly know what our jurisdiction is around the requirement for members of council, as Councillor Moffat has said. I mean, there's no point in putting a policy in place if we can't uphold it. So maybe we need more information from the province or whomever. Mike Rutter, maybe you could get that for us. I mean, it's hard to make a decision when, if it's not going to hold up, it's like making bylaws that we can't enforce. It doesn't make sense.
Councillor DeVolen.
A couple things. First of all, the Councillor Shell's comment, there's no case law on this, so we're working in a vacuum, which is kind of a rare bird. Do I think that either level of government will give us a hard and fast, dirty ruling on that? No, they've been hesitant all the way along, so I don't think that's going to change. I probably have a minority view. I think healthcare workers, educators, members of government should be fully vaxxed, full stop. Now, whether that in the end does or doesn't cost them their job, I on a daily basis, I go back and forth over that one, I'll be honest. But I just, and from my own personal rights, I mean, I have the right when I'm in an indoor atmosphere or whatever, to have the confidence that people are fully vaxxed. And if I don't have that confidence, then the flip side of that is I have the right to not participate in that indoor setting as we go forward. And that's the flip side of that coin. Having said this, there's a lot of good, valid views on this. And obviously, it's kind of a 90-10. It's obvious that 90% of our community in the province have one view and 10% don't. And the question is, whose rights have primacy in this? And most of, with the disease and those sort of things, those things that protect health of citizens usually prevail, but certainly that has not been the course with COVID. And like I say, I'll live wherever we go in this, but my personal views are probably more black and white than some others. And you can say that that's a simple view. I would say it's just my worldview on a few things, and it just is what it is.
Councillor Ryle.
I actually totally agree with Councillor DeVolen, if not probably a little stronger than he does. And we can get into all of the logistics and we can start a whole new platform arguing over whether we should or shouldn't based on rights and all kinds of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I'd like to go where I'm safe. And if someone is going to sit on council and be allowed to attend and not be vaccinated, then I have the right not to be there and not get disqualified either.
Councillor Burton.
Certainly agreed with what Brent had to say. I'm not sure if I agree with what Cease just said, but anyway, I'm actually, I'm fine with the way it is, Warden. Yes, we're going to run into a few obstacles, but I would suggest that we try it and see how it plays out. I hear Dysart's is working well. Well, good for them. Let's see if we can't make this one work and move on.
Councillor Moffat, I still think that we need to resolve some of these questions before we just, adopt the policy, because there's some outstanding issues that we haven't clarified yet. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I'm back to, and yes, I'm harping on process, and the other outstanding issue in my mind, and talk me out of it if you'd like to try or help me out here, is if the decision has already been made that that EMS staff do a rapid test, and they are county employees, then I don't understand how we can ask for something different unless we're also going to ask the EMS staff as county employees to abide by this policy. Have I missed something there? because it's two different things. We're saying in this one, we're saying if you are unvaccinated, you must provide a test, PCR test that you have booked and paid for yourself. But if you're EMS staff, you get a rapid test at the beginning of your shift. So I'm just not sure how we reconcile employees in that regard. I'm kind of looking at Mike Rutter. He's up here on my screen, but
I think, first of all, that decision hasn't been made. It was made from September till now. Now we're reviewing a policy, and we have a council has a decision to make on whether you carry on with that or put them into the same stream as the rest of everyone else. I do think because it's a healthcare environment, the daily or the test before every shift has merit. I'll be honest, and I'm not sure how you do that practically when with the PCR testing protocol. So I do think that there's merit in having that test before every shift. So again, the conversation, it would not be a huge stretch for us to provide those, because we've already signed up with the province to get the tests. We have the reporting mechanisms built in. It wouldn't be a huge stretch for us to extend that to our staff, the rest of our staff. But the conversation with the working group was definitely that, that was an administrative process. They weren't interested in incorporating into their policies.
I wonder if our policy could say something to the effect that, sort of in addition to, like, if the paramedics are going to be sort of niched into this policy, that we add something that would say that they would be required to, in addition to a daily rapid test, if they're unvaccinated, get a weekly PCR test, which would put them on the same footing as everybody else who's not vaccinated. Councillor Kennedy, then Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I fully support Councillor Moffat's comments. And in fact, my second round of questions included the words very hypocritical that we're allowing one group of county employees who have the most contact with vulnerable populations to get by with a rapid test, and yet staff who have limited contact with the public are going to lose their jobs, basically. So I really struggle with that. And the comments about anti-vaxxers and tin hats, I take offense to. A number of people I've spoken to are not anti-vaccination, but they're scared or unsure of what might happen, of medical conditions that aren't covered under the two little boxes that the province has set out, but they're not anti-vaccination. They're not even anti, they're just very, very concerned about what might happen to their personal body. And so I think that there's room here to accommodate. And I'm a full disclosure, I'm triple vax. So I'm quite confident about vaccinations work, but I am also respectful of a person's personal commitments and personal beliefs and possible medical conditions that don't fit in the box. So I really struggle with some of the language going on here this morning. And if it comes to a vote, I'll ask for a recorded one. Thank you.
Mr. Rutter?
Could I just clarify that the paramedics would still be subject to the 75 days and would be placed on an unpaid leave of absence if they didn't provide proof of full vaccination at the end of that 75-day period. It's not that they are not subject to the ultimate. It's more the testing protocol during that 75-day period that is different. The leave of absence provision applies to all.
Councillor Moffat, then Councillor Royal.
I had a similar note to Councillor Kennedy about the disconnect between the EMS who are daily interacting with the public on a basis that might provide them more exposure. But he already said all that. So, but if your offense to the anti-vaxxers comments, Pat, was to me, we're actually on the same page there. But there are still people who think that the vaccine is putting a chip in their head. So those are the people that I'm not interested in having any conversation with.
We're on the same page on that one.
We absolutely are. I just want to clarify that. I mean, we all know people who have had serious negative reactions I think we need to pull back and look at what is our purpose here? Is our purpose to provide a safe workplace or to assist in the proposed eradication of this? And those are two very different approaches. We are not the World Health Organization. You know, we can only do what we can do. That's the best for our community and our people. We're not the city of Toronto with 8,000 employees. We're still a small community. And when we talked about this before, the policy that's in front of us, I thought, yeah, it seems reasonable, but I just keep thinking about it. And it's the job loss part that I really struggle with. And if we can accommodate people, that's good. The problem is we can't say, okay, well, Mildred, because it's always Mildred's fault. Mildred, why aren't you vaccinated? And then judge that. Like, we can't get involved in any of that. So it's you're either in or you're out for one process or the other. I support the changing of the language for the review, because I think we do need to be attentive. We know through all of our EOC meetings through the pandemic, when we were all under declared emergencies, that landscape shifted almost daily, and we were constantly juggling to find new ways. And I think that the changing of the language for the term of the review of this policy, I support the language, two of the three sentences that are in the DISART policy, because it's more flexible and requires us to be more attentive to that changing landscape. I think I saw a bunch of nodding heads around that. So I don't really feel like I'm any further ahead in this conversation.
Councillor Ryle first, and then Councillor Kennedy.
My question was for Mike. Mike, are the EMS guys under a different set of provincial requirements? I mean, we can pass a bylaw here, but are they kind of stuck with regulations from the province that basically override anything we decide?
The provincial directives came into effect earlier. So that was in early September. Those requirements came into effect for paramedics, the EMS team. But now there is an opportunity to create a policy that essentially replaces those, which again, we've tried to incorporate that into the document in front of you. But I guess the only way they're in a different regime is that it was implemented earlier. It was implemented in September.
Councillor Moffat. And then Councillor Roberts. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to go to Pat before I go to you, Andrea, and Carol.
Yeah, just something else to throw into the mix is I see that the daily case counts are now basically 50-50%. Double vaxxed are exhibiting symptoms, and those who aren't. So perhaps we should also look at, and I'd be fully in favor of this, is regular rapid testing of all our staff, whether they're vaccinated or not. But with those kind of case counts going up, we're in the medical officer of health says that we can continue to expect the rising double vaccination case counts on the rise. Then if we're truly going to be proactive, then that should also, maybe not for today's discussion, but should certainly factor into some future language in a policy. And to Cease's comments, yes, there is much flexibility in Directive 6. Some other services have chosen the termination route, including, I believe, the City of Toronto and some others in Southwestern Ontario. And so there is flexibility. You can either go the rapid test or the termination route. So that's my understanding.
Councillor Robertson, then Councillor Moffat.
Well, Councillor Kennedy kind of beat me to it. I just wrote, a vaccinated person is just as likely to infect someone as an unvaccinated person. The purpose of the vaccines were to help save our healthcare system from a complete and utter tsunami of healthcare crisis, which we were very close to, and we saw in other provinces across the country we're definitely in. And so we cannot stop all the other things that we are going to probably be having to do for a long time. I'm going to get my booster when my days, when the time period is elapsed. It's to prevent the healthcare system. So that is why I will still, talk about the policy that we have, is that I agree with vaccines. I thank goodness, 95% compliance or even higher. But I'm really concerned with the job loss and the unpaid leave of absence, and then for how long and why. So we aren't going to stop wearing I'm not going to stop wearing my mask, especially in crowded places. My husband said he'll always wear a mask going through an airport or on an airplane. Like we're changing how we think about things, but COVID's not going away, not for a long, long time. We might be getting annual boosters. So it isn't about vaccinated or unvaccinated right now. It's preventing the spread of COVID, which is still happening, and vaccinated people are still transmitting the disease.
But one good thing about it is that the vaccinated people are likely to be less ill than those that are unvaccinated.
That's my point.
That's what helps the system overall. I'm still hung up on, it's our responsibility to ensure the health and safety of our residents and provide a safe place for them to come to should they need it. I mean, we have a public place here and we have to do the best we can to make sure that everyone's safe. Councillor DeVolen, I see your hand up.
Just a point of clarification, on a daily basis, if the case count between vaccinated and unvaccinated are the same, but there's 9 times as many people that are vaccinated as unvaccinated, that doesn't mean the transmissibility is the same and even in those groups.
Councillor Moffat.
I'm not prepared to debate any of that because I don't know. I want to go back again to process, and I want to circle back to what Cease said. So Cease said if somebody was unvaccinated, he would exercise his right not to attend. And so if there were, and remember, this is not about the 8 faces on this screen, there, as has been noted, there's an election coming. And I think that needs to be addressed in some time. I think AMO or Municipal Affairs will come out with something around that because it's a viable topic. However, this is like the logic train. So if Cease were to exercise his right to not attend because he doesn't want to be in the same room with someone who's not vaccinated, that would be his choice. Would the County of Haliburton then provide authorization as per the Act to excuse him for 3 months or an extended period of time? Or would we change the procedural bylaw to allow for an alternate way to attend? And if you do the latter, then you're saying somebody who's unvaccinated can just zoom in from home, which I believe is a slippery slope to zooming in from Costa Rica or zooming in from the balcony of the ship when you're on holidays. And so we've already had that conversation. And, for anybody who thinks, oh, for God's sake, this is actually a serious procedural discussion because we are kind of painting ourselves potentially into a corner because we don't have the information. So we can either say, you know what, we don't have the information. Let's go ahead with this and agree to change the policy term and review process so that we can remain flexible and resilient around the changing landscape, or we can, try and figure it all out now, because the 8 of us are going to talk about, or the 9 of us are going to talk about this for about 7 hours if we don't figure out which direction to go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It had been my hope that we would be able to land somewhere today. Because we can't continue to keep bringing it back with more and more and more. At some point, we have to do the best we can with the information that we've got. I'd like to hear if what Carol is suggesting is sounding reasonable to people. I know that there may be some faces on the screen who do not think that's reasonable, but I'd like to see who does think that approach is reasonable. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, and I just want to say again that this is not in any way to accommodate, that certain faction of the world that does not have a reasonable position. And somebody could say, well, reasonable is subjective. Our job is to provide a safe workplace and a safe place for the public to attend to their business. And I think if we put enough stopgap measures in place or enough process in place at the front of it, we're not violating anybody's. Not talking the public. I'm really stuck on this council thing. We need to make sure that we're not violating people's right to engage and participate in a democratic process.
Councillor DeVolen.
I think the reason we're in this situation is because the province have been a gutless bunch. They're the ones that define the municipal act and everything else. they have all of the data at the fingertips. They could have easily, whichever side of this issue you happen to be from, laid clear guidelines for municipalities so that 444 municipalities aren't going through this gut-wrenching stuff we're going today. That you know, if there's a path that with reviews with regularity that we can strike today and move on. But again, I think it's they've advocated their responsibility, thrust us into that we're not in control of the legislation that is the framework over, above, and around this. And like I say, I've done my pontificating for this morning, but if we can have language and something that has regular reviews, the notion of that our whole organization, EMS or not, that if there's one simple, I wouldn't say simple set of, uniform set of rules across the organization, as Councillor Kennedy said, I definitely would be in support of that. The pay or not pay in this whole scheme of things, I'm not going to die on that hill. If there's free ones from the province or elsewhere, or if we have to pay some money to do the right thing, I can be persuaded that if it's on the municipal dime, as a member of this council that's no longer with us, many times reminded us there's only one taxpayer. So in that sense, it's irrelevant whether we pay or the province pays. So anyways, I'm willing to work towards a bit of ground that we can live with, that is reviewed with regularity as the circumstances change. But I'm also agree that there are people that have rights that are contrary to vaccinations, but mindful that my rights are as important as their rights. So I'm not sure that gives you a clear path, Mr. Rudder, how you frame that we might put this in a box, but I'm willing to work in the spirit towards that. So if you have some pearls of wisdom to add to this that maybe give us some boundaries and some guidance, that would be wonderful.
Just before Mike speaks, I just did want to say that this is not the first time that we've had this discussion, and we've given our CAOs direction previously about how we wanted to deal with this, and they've struggled with this hard on our behalf, and may not even agree with what they put forward as individuals. But we have asked them to do this work for us. We've all asked for it. I know that Dysart has not been on the same path, but the rest of us have. So, I'd hope that we could, as you say, Councillor Dwellin, land someplace today, get something in place and just keep it in the forefront for regular review. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry to.
Well, I guess I'm just, I have some questions more than anything. So what I'm hearing is that council would like us to get a legal opinion on how it can be applied to members of council. Is that correct?
If that such a thing is available, I would say yes.
I heard Dysart's wording around the policy review, and then I heard 2 of the 3 sentences. Which 2? Or is it all 3?
Go ahead, Councillor Moffat.
That was me, and yeah, as to use Brent's phrase today, I'm not going to die on that hill. I just wasn't in favor of that the policy being in effect while the vaccination passport program's in effect. I think that just creates a bit of a muddy water. But I say this with all due respect to the severity of the situation. Like, I don't care. It's whether it's 2 sentences or 3 sentences. I don't know that it matters. The policy review in our draft policy is not acceptable or not desirable to me. And so if we can somehow mirror what Dysart's got, that offers a little more flexibility and attentiveness, that's good.
And then we heard about a uniform set of rules. And I guess there are really 2 sets of rules in the policy. There's what the EMS do, and then there's what's being proposed. Which uniform set of rules are you wanting us to include in the next iteration?
Comments? Councillor Moffat.
I would like Councillor Kennedy to go back to his comments about, which I said I had something similar, but he phrased it better about EMS staff are currently testing at the start of each shift, and I'm sorry, I have a really squeaky chair, at the beginning of each shift, they are the people who are facing the most vulnerable people every day, whereas people in the office, some of whom may be working remotely, aren't seeing very many people, if at all. So I don't know if Pat wants to circle back on what he said about that, and maybe that could provide some guidance there.
Go ahead, Councillor Kennedy.
Need to hit the replay button. My short-term memory is getting bad.
It's COVID train.
I do feel that the rapid testing, at minimum, at least once a week, and medics as the start of every shift, I think is a great compromise to me. I still believe that everybody should be vaccinated, but if that's your own personal belief not, then you don't have to jump through some hoops, and that includes taking a rapid test before the start of every shift, or at least weekly for those non-EMS, then I think that's a pretty fair compromise, in my opinion.
And the same would hold true for members of council.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that would be one way to sort of balance it out. If there's going to be like two aspects of the policy, council and the paramedics could be in one and everybody else in the other group. Councillor Rowell and then Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I think that sometimes when you open a kettle of fish and can of worms, it kind of sort of grows beyond its understanding. And I'm glad to see that. And I'm also in the same boat. Sometimes you get a little warm when you're saying something because you either truly believe it and or you're representing people who truly believe it. Having said that, I like what Councillor Kennedy is suggesting, and I certainly would have absolutely no problem whatsoever in taking a rapid test whenever I was told to. I'm a solid supporter of vaccination, and I wear it on my sleeve. But at the end of the day, I understand that there are other people's rights. And yes, I was adamant too about looking at the unpaid part of it. But again, we don't even know what the impact of this is going to be yet. It could be a very minor number of people who choose to go that route. And using due diligence, we can determine whether or not that's something that's being done just to exercise their ability to have unpaid holidays, or if it's totally legitimate. So again, heat of the moment sometimes make you say things that get meant slightly out of proportion. So that could be one that I just did.
Mr. Rutter, I saw your hand up.
So I guess what I'm hearing from Councillor Kennedy is that we're essentially looking at the Dysart policy.
No laughing. No, not in my mind, not exactly at all. I mean, I do like the review aspect of it, but I won't agree to attestation at all.
Okay. So, but in terms of the, if you're not providing proof of vaccination, we don't go to leave of absence without pay. We go to a testing protocol, and we can talk about what that looks like. Is that the direction I'm hearing?
I'm seeing two nodding faces. We need a little bit more. Kind of, well, and we're still looking for a bit of a for a legal opinion, because I've got to go back to Councillor Schell's comment in the first place about how can we put a policy in place. And just to clarify, Councillor Ryle, it's a policy, not a bylaw. How can we put a policy in place that we can't enforce, or there's conflicting legislation? So I think we do still, I hate to say it because it defers adopting the policy, but what does council feel about getting a legal opinion on members of council? Councillor Moffat.
Well, we don't know, and so somebody has to advise us.
I'm afraid that they're not going to know either. Councillor Moffat, then Councillor Schell.
Yeah, I think it's going to be all contained in the language of the resignation, like that section, not the resignation section, but the section of the Municipal Act that governs. how and why we have our offices. I mean, our positions exist at the pleasure of the municipal act, not at the pleasure of the corporation. And I'm happy to be wrong on that. But anyway, I think I've landed. I agree, Madam Warden. I do not support the attestation aspect. And I agree with Councillor DeVolen. If we have to provide, I was really sort of riding my high horse about you got to pay for it, but we have a lot of things going on in the county, and I do not want to suggest in any way that we have bigger fish to fry. That's not what I'm saying, but I think we can come to a compromise here. I think if you have, no vaccination plus no test equals no entry, because there are people who say, oh, I'm never getting a test. Well, then stay home. And then that can be that, to echo Councillor Kennedy, that's the trap, not the trap, but that's the outcome, the repercussion. The implication is if you can't or refuse to participate in any process, any part of this process, then no entry to buildings or access or our work.
Can we agree on that? I'm seeing everybody saying yes to that. Councillor Shell?
So just a couple of things. I also do not agree to the attestation. I think that, when you have to go, you want to go to the arena or you want to go to a restaurant, you have to show the passport. And as long as that's in place at the province, I think that that's something that we as the county should do as well. My biggest concern is that we are going to be seen by the public that if we don't get the legal opinion, and they may not even have one, but at least we'll have done the due diligence of seeking one, that council is treating ourselves differently than we are treating our staff and committee members. And I don't want that to be perceived by the whole county, the community, that, we're doing something for ourselves that we're not willing to do for staff, and, they can lose their jobs. So I think it's important that we have the legal opinion about whether or not we can put that in place on council members. Because if we can, then I think it should be the same for staff and committee members. We did that in Minden Hills, and I just think it's only fair. But going back to what Councillor Moffat said, maybe we don't even have the jurisdiction around that to do that. So again, we may not even get a clear answer from legal, but I think we should do the due diligence of at least seeking. We've come this far. I don't know if 2 weeks is going to make a big difference, seeing how we're not meeting in person anyway.
But we do, staff are.
Agreed. And I guess, yeah, I agreed. Yeah.
So we do need to get we're agreed that we're going to seek a legal opinion on that aspect of the policy. Yes. And I would ask, so that's going to come, it will, hopefully we can get that opinion before our next meeting. That's going to come back to us. I would ask members of council to seriously consider the issue of, are we going to expect people to lose their jobs or not? Are we going to go with the testing route, or are we going to go with leave of absence that could be an extended leave of absence? So we really do need to land on that and be able to make a decision on this at our next meeting. But I'd look for any other comments or questions that you might have at this point. Councillor Moffat.
Again, trying to go through the dispassionate logic train here. I don't see it. You start to get muddled in your mind. It's not our job to make people get vaccinated. It's our job to create a safe workplace and protect those we can protect. And I think we can do that by ensuring people, the few, look at the numbers in Dysart, by requiring the tests. So it's almost like circling the wagons. If the purpose and the intent is to provide a safe workplace and a safe public space for people, then we put policy in place that governs access to those places and those people, not necessarily to the world. Because Lisa's right. Sorry, Councillor Shell is right that you already have to show proof to go certain places. And so we would become one of those places. You have to show proof of something. You have to show proof that you do not have COVID. You either are vaccinated or you have a negative test. I think ultimately, if we refine what the purpose of our role is, then that, from what I'm hearing today, that sounds like that's more doable and achievable for us as a small corporation than to try and use our policy processes to eradicate COVID from the world, which I know is a lofty statement.
It is a lofty statement. I wonder what actually the province's intent is, to create a safe workplace or to ensure that everybody gets vaccinated. And I think that their goal is the second, to try and get everybody vaccinated, and that without giving us the ability or the chops to land somewhere solid. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just to, obviously, you know what I'm going to say, which is I just agree with Carol. So she just offered that option because we have to give direction to Mike, or else he's going to come back and go, what am I supposed to do for council at the next meeting? I've got the legal opinion, but am I supposed to present the same draft bylaw? So I would support that, like Councillor Moffat just said, which is you either show proof of your vaccination or proof that you have a negative test. So that's, if we're going to look around the table so that our CAO knows what's expected of him.
Councillor Moffat.
Great. And then back to CISA's hypothetical situation then. If we agree that that's the route we should take in this regard, with the complexity of the elected official position, what, if any, changes are we going to consider, if necessary, around the procedural bylaw? You know, was CIS being facetious? Does somebody have the right to say, well, I'm an elected official and I'm vaccinated, and I'm not going in the room with Mildred, she's not vaccinated, so I'm going to stay home and I demand the right to Zoom into meetings? Because that can work the other way around, because then someone says, well, I'm not vaccinated, I'm not taking your test, and I'm going to stay home and Zoom in for meetings. And then I think that's the slippery slope to people Zooming in to meetings as council members with, you know, a daiquiri in their hand from the beach. Like, where does it end? We would have to be the ones that would put the front and back on that, as we have already done.
I'll go to Councillor Rowell and then Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, obviously the heat of the moment comes into certain plays, and at the end of the day, when you're making statements, you make them because of what else has been said as well. And in this particular case, my argument was pretty straightforward. One, I would not do that. I am double vaccinated. I will be third vaccinated in January. I certainly would be willing to be tested. So as me individually, I use myself because I wasn't going to use anybody else as an example. All I was approaching there was the right of someone to not attend because they don't want to be vaccinated, as opposed to someone who has to attend because they are vaccinated. And that was my only point in making that statement. And at the end of the day, if you're talking about the rights of people, councillors, anybody in general, there's two sides to that coin. And it's a place that I don't want to be here. I don't want to be, I want to be here at the meeting, but I don't want to be in a position where I got to make those kinds of decisions. I wish the province had given us better direction. They have not. And I am totally okay with what we're doing here to try to give everybody the great opportunity. And as long as I feel safe, in fact, anybody feels safe, be it because I know the people around me are vaccinated, or I know they've been recently tested. And as the numbers go down, and I hope they will, I realize right now they're going up a little bit. I just think that at the end of the day, there's a lot of passions being put into this thing. And sometimes we're driven by passion as opposed to logic. And I guess I'm one of the ones that kind of go 50-50.
Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
So to Councillor Rael's point about how I would feel if I knew, we won't know. There's a confidentiality clause in there. It's completely with CAO and the head of HR. And so while we have disclosed throughout these conversations about whether someone has a booster or you're going to get your booster or whatever, we don't have to share that. It's confidential, private information that will be secure. And so, but I feel confident knowing that we could go forward with a policy that is ensuring safety for ourselves when we come back to being able to meet in person, and for our employees. So the confidentiality clause covers that.
So can we generally agree at this point in time that we're looking for either proof of vaccination or a test for individuals who, well, I'm seeing the majority saying yes to that. So I'm not sure if you have enough, Mike, to bring this back to us, with the exception of a legal agreement on the issue of counselors. And I'm sure none of us look forward to having this conversation again, but we will, probably a number of times, but for sure at our next meeting. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Just very quickly, if we're all nodded our heads on the last comment, Warden, that you just made, do we need the legal opinion about counselors, or are we confident to say proof of vaccination or proof of negative test, and we all just agree with that? And so maybe just bring another draft bylaw back, including those. And sorry, now I see Mike.
It's not a bylaw.
My advice, sorry.
Go ahead, thank you.
My advice is to get the legal opinion, because if, as Councillor Moffat envisioned, someone says, I won't show proof of vaccine and I won't take a test, then what? So I still think we need that answer for members of council. So my advice would be to carry on and get the legal opinion. We know what we can do with staff who refuse that. We're not sure what we could do with members of council.
And we're talking initially, just to clarify, are we talking initially about a rapid test? And if you fail the rapid test, you must take a PCR test. Okay. So are we agreed? We will seek we'll make some modifications to the policy, and we'll seek a legal opinion. Go ahead, Councillor Moffat.
Honestly, I promise you this is my final thought, that should we send a letter to the province saying there's an election coming, you better come out with something around elections and vaccines. I mean, it could end up being one of those things that we all get on our agendas that we go, oh, I roll, but I don't know. Because I think Brent's absolutely right that they haven't provided the direction that they should have, and they've put this really uncomfortable conversation on us. They've
mandated that we did develop a policy without giving us the chops, or the ability to land somewhere that's fair. Okay, so I guess we are deferring this item, and no resolution is required. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are there any other comments before we move on? This is tough. I don't think anybody wants to do this, but we've got to, apparently we've got to land somewhere. Thank you, everyone. I know that it is a very difficult conversation, and that we don't all agree, but hopefully at our next meeting we can land somewhere that we can all accept. So moving on to reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. We have a set of minutes from the health unit. Councillor Roberts, have you any updates for us at all?
Yeah, not from those minutes. I was not at that meeting, but we did have a meeting last week, and I just wanted to share, as well advertised, but there are clinics coming up at the school over the next 3 Saturdays, I believe. And so that's going to be starting to target the age 5 to 11, but those clinics are really available for anybody who's eligible in the booking system. And during the last hour of any clinic, they are open to walk-ins if you are eligible. So, and including to the booster. So that's a bit of a risk. I personally prefer to have a booked appointment, but they are open. Hospitals, primary care, and EMS are being asked to do their own staff for the booster. So I Tim's not on the screen, but just to check that our EMS are able to do the booster when they're available. EMS are also asked to do the homebound and other congregate settings. So again, that's maybe a question at the committee of the whole to ask Tim how our paramedicine program is working with that. We also received more confirmation about the one-time funding for extraordinary costs, and I'm really sorry, I've got a blank for the amount, but it is over $2 million in total for the HKPR for extraordinary expenses due to COVID-19. So that's huge. We would not be coming in on budget if that wasn't happening. And also in the news, and maybe we've heard, but and HKPR did write a letter regarding the optometrists and having eye examinations covered under OHIP, that the province, through some pressure of health units and all kinds of other organizations, have reversed that decision. And so now eye appointments are covered. So that's really good news.
That's very good news. Well, you're just full of good news this morning. Mr. Rutter, could you provide any insight on the issues with respect to impact on our paramedics?
We are, as I understand it, providing those services as outlined by Councillor Roberts. So we are giving boosters to those who received it from community paramedics initially, and we are providing those services to homebound patients as well. So yeah, we are working with the health unit, and things are, I'm not sure if they've actually started to deliver those, but they were certainly preparing at our last department head meeting, the chief mentioned.
Any questions for Councillor Roberts? Okay, next is point in time. Anything that you'd like to bring to our attention, Councillor Schell?
Thank you, Warden Danielson. Just one of the things that we had learned at our meeting is that, and for anybody who's needing or wanting to request anything from point in time right now, the wait times are really low. So it's a good time to seek that if required. And as of I think it was the third week of October, the school board has actually allowed point in time to once again set up their allowed to operate within the high school doing their clinic, which I know is extremely important. So I was glad to hear that.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Schell? With respect to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, we will be meeting on December the 3rd. Sadly, we were trying to plan our first in-person meeting, and everyone agreed at our last meeting that we were all double vaxxed and that we would be able to meet. But since then, there have been some, small outbreaks here and there, and people started to pull back a little bit. So we're back to meeting virtually. Which is unfortunate, but I mean, it's the safest direction to go in. We're hoping to organize our inaugural meeting in January as an in-person session, but that remains to be seen. We need to find a facility that will house all of the new wardens, the past wardens, and our CAOs. And that's a big room. And we also need to see if we can find some way of providing a combination of in-person and virtual options. So we'll see how that goes. The one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that this Wardens Caucus will be looking at just sort of reaffirming priorities for the new Wardens Caucus, and those will be reviewed again in the new year by the new Wardens Caucus. But as I've mentioned to you in the past, those priorities include housing, long-term care, the revamping of our health system, broadband, recovery from the pandemic for municipalities, and social services as well. So if you see something or think of something or have some thoughts about something that should be added to the list of priorities for the Wardens Caucus, please let me know, or Mike, and we can bring that up for consideration at our meeting on December the 3rd. Also, the Warden's Caucus, or as many of them as possible, will be meeting with the MPPs from Eastern Ontario this Friday to talk again about our priorities and where we stand, and try to assure that they are on the same page as us, which isn't always the case, that's for sure. Otherwise, that's it for me for now. Anything from Joint Social and Housing?
As you'll hear in a couple other comments, we're meeting next week.
Okay. Anything on professional recruitment at this point? Mr. Ritter?
I could just advise that Councillor Moffat and Warden Danielson and I and HR participated in an interview process, and we were able to recruit a new recruiter. Wendy Welch has started with us last week, I believe, and I think she's in the process of learning what the program, learning the program that existed currently and meeting all of the various stakeholders. So, but we're very excited to have Wendy with us, and we really expect good things, continued good things. And once again, Cheryl Kennedy just did a fabulous job, and we owe her a great debt for all that she did putting this program in place and creating such a successful foundation.
Well, and I think that Cheryl has offered some assistance to just kind of help Wendy just get her feet solidly on the ground and get started on recruitment issues. Anything from the library board that we need to know right now?
If I may just, other than great donation. I don't know if anyone saw that on social media, that the Haliburton Rotary Club donated enough money to cover a program called Canopy, which Chris Stevenson, our new CEO, likens it to a sort of Netflix. So you get so many points per month per your library card. And so it's not up and running just yet. We'll find out when it's actually up and running, but that you can download or watch movies, documentaries, foreign films, that kind of thing. So I'm personally really excited about using my library card for that, because I'm a big online library user card now that I've discovered the Libby app. I'm hooked on that one. And yeah, so that was, and he's done a lot of media interviews and stuff. So he's really getting out in the community, which is great.
That's great. Any questions for Councillor Roberts? Okay, we have a motion. If I could have a mover and a seconder to accept the reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. Councillor Moffat and Councillor DeVolen.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor DeVolen. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the following: the September 16th, 2021 approved minutes from the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit Board of Health meeting, and the September 28th, 2021 approved minutes from the Point in Time Center for Children, Youth, and Parents meeting.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is the Land Division Activity Report. I think they will bring Mr. Stone back in.
Thank you, Madam Warden, to the rest of the council. So we were fortunate to have a committee meeting this month, and we considered 6 applications. 3 were approved and 3 were deferred to allow the agent the opportunity to investigate some environmental matters that were identified. We're also in the process of considering a number of applications that were submitted towards the end of the last month and early this month for completeness. We won't have any applications scheduled for the committee's consideration in December, but if we receive comments back in a timely fashion from the ones that we're circulating, we'll try and have a committee meeting hosted in January, but I'll be up against the Planning Act circulation windows sort of midway through December. So I'll advise the committee at that point if we'll be able to host a meeting in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the land division report? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to accept that report? Councillors Roberts and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Kennedy, be it resolved that the November 24th, 2021 staff report on land division activity be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Under other external boards and agencies, I think maybe we need to change OGRA to Good Roads, seeing as how they've officially changed their name. I don't think they like being called OGRA anymore.
We didn't like it from the beginning. So, you know, but anyway, it was Ontario Good Roads Association, but now it's Good Roads. And I do have my committee meetings tomorrow and board meeting on Friday.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to hearing from you after you have those meetings. Thank you. Councillor DeVolen, any updates on the EORN front?
I mean, our mobile broadband initiative goes forward, and just to reiterate or clarify that there are upfitting on existing infrastructure that continues. The process of putting up new towers takes a bit of time, and certainly with the changing landscape with First Nations in the country and duty to consult, I can say that they are going well. I would say that they're far more expansive and detailed in terms of the dialogue and the breadth of back and forth that has gone on historically. So the good news is, you know, as we get into the 2022 year, new builds, applications coming for some of those things to each of our jurisdictions, and to help those go forward would be appreciated. But I kind of think that 2022 will be the year that there becomes some volume of activity. Like I say, the first step to get it all started because of processes, whatever, always seems like very, very, very slow. But the reality is I can see that 2022 and 2023 are going to be really, really active years as we go forward.
Well, we look forward to seeing the positive results from that work. Any questions for Councillor DeVolen? Next is Indigenous Affairs, and I guess I would just question where we are with our land acknowledgement.
It's on my to-do list to talk to the warden about. I think a number of the municipalities have passed one, and so we have been monitoring that. We along with some other staff or staff from the county, along with local municipal staff, participated in some training on Indigenous awareness, and so we have some information coming out of that, and I think we're ready to bring back a report in the very near future. So we're very close.
Councillor DeVolen?
And just the poverty reduction roundtable is there. We're also meeting next week that I will be reporting out the next when we meet in December.
Thank you. Okay, under other business, we just have the meeting calendar, and I would just like to note that there is a community safety and well-being meeting planned for December the 15th in the afternoon. That's a special meeting, so if you could make note of that. And just to confirm that the Haliburton County Rail Trails Steering Committee meeting is now December the 13th at 1 o'clock. There's been some a little bit of conflicting times and dates with that, so I think we've landed there as a date that we can all meet. Councillor Roberts?
Just to add, Dicer has a budget meeting on December 10th at 9 a.m.
Thank you. We'll make that an amendment. So that takes us into, or that's the conclusion of our regular business in open. That takes us to our closed session. So could I have a mover and a seconder to go into closed? Councillor Shell and Councillor Moffat. I guess I should ask, does anyone need desire a 10-minute break before we actually start our closed session? Okay, so could we reconvene in closed at 10:45? A mover and a seconder, please, to go into closed.
We already have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we did. Sorry.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council enter into closed session for the following reasons. The matter in respect of which a council, board, committee, or other body may hold a closed meeting under another act.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll see you in a few minutes.
And we're back live. I think you're on mute, Warden Danielson.
Sorry about that. So we have no bylaws other than the confirming bylaw. Are there any notice of motions? Okay, hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Moffat and Councillor Kennedy.
By Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that bylaw 4077, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the November 24th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn, please? Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Rao.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that the November 24th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you this afternoon at 1 o'clock.
Bye.